You are listening to the Final Say radio show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
I want to introduce our next guest from the Heritage Foundation, Ariel Cohen, who's the Senior Research Fellow for Russian and Eurasian Studies and International Energy Policy, the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies. Ariel Cohen, it's a pleasure to have you, and I very much enjoyed it. In fact, I think I've watched it 3 times, the event that you hosted after the failed Russian reset. What is next?
3 times? I should start selling tickets or subscription.
It was very interesting, and you have to listen to things like that numerous times because you hear it, but it doesn't sink in every fact and all the things that were said. So I did actually go back and listen to it 3 times. I thought it was very timely because as we see all the things that, of course, it always seems to be the United States, China, and Russia who are knocking heads together as we're trying to deal with these issues of foreign policy. But with regards to Russia, you have a drastic change in human rights issues going on right now. You have significant issues with regards to a rising feeling of dislike for the United States and Russia. And so I'll let you jump in and give you some of the things that you thought were most important.
Well, first of all, I can't help. The event that you mentioned was an event on the next 4 years of the Obama administration and U.S.-Russian relations, and it's available in video on heritage.org. So if you go to heritage.org and click on events, you can find it. It was, about a week ago, correct?
A little over a week ago, yes.
Yeah. Now, in terms of what the Obama administration is facing, it is facing a decline in American power, rather the perception of American power declining. I wouldn't say we have a relative power decline. We do have an absolute power decline, and it's going to get worse because of the cuts in the military budget, because of the sequester. In the meantime, when you cut your military budget and your foreign operations, people around the world, including people who don't like you, get emboldened, and that includes Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, now at his 3rd term, and I would say his 4th term, because in between there was an interregnum of Dmitry Medvedev, the former president, the current prime minister, but de facto Putin remained the ruler of Russia. Nothing happened there without Putin's approval. Now, Putin doesn't like us very much. He was an intelligence officer during the Cold War. He was trained in the 1970s in the KGB Red Banner Institute, and for those of us who are fans of the TV show The Americans, you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about KGB. It was an organization, its foreign intelligence branch was dedicated to undermining and destroying the United States. In fact, on April 4th, if I may put another plug for the Heritage Foundation, on April 4th, we're going to have a conference dedicated to a very interesting American, Harry Dexter White. Harry Dexter White was the architect of the post-World War II financial architecture of the world. He created these institutions such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. He also was a Soviet spy, and he came this close to become the first managing director of the International Monetary Fund, a position of great power, especially in the economic collapse after the World War II. So KGB produced outstanding spies. It ran networks of American agents in the United States, and the product of the KGB, the graduate of the KGB, is now running Russia. And that does not help U.S.-Russian relations. So now we see disagreements over Syria, over Iran, over missile defense, and President Obama is for a rocky ride in the next 4 years.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, Ariel, I want to just take a a slight objection to what you had mentioned earlier about absolute versus relative, because it seems to me that while that our relative power is actually weaker, and I'll make my case by simply pointing out, I believe we are in a very carefully calculated, if not coordinated amongst themselves, proxy war with Russia, China, and Iran, all having proxy wars with much like what we dealt with all through the Cold War against America. So it feels to me that our relative power, given the fact that through most of the Cold War we were primarily only dealing with Russia, we now have two other adversaries. One, China has pure mass and power. Iran, I would say, has power due to what equipment they have, but their willingness basically to sacrifice people and to cause terror and mayhem.
But Iran, if I may interrupt, Iran has power because of its oil revenue, and as long as our sanctions are not supported by China and Russia and are toothless, essentially, and not really effective, the little discomfort that we are causing the mullahs are not enough for them to stop their runaway nuclear program.
Well, sure, because they don't personally feel the effects of it, right? People at the lower echelons of society will. The other thing is that we are an open society, and that has always been a disadvantage. You pointed out how many great spies there were in Russia, but I would argue a big part of that problem is we're much easier to spy on. We have a wide open society, and Russia is closing up more again, and then you have China, who's a fairly close society, and Iran, who's a very close society. So it feels to me like it's very difficult for America to win this game if we don't have not just an absolute, but a very wide margin in military strength over the other adversaries.
This is partially correct, and when I said that we are relatively strong, that not necessarily taking into account that both China and Russia have large military modernization programs. China is launching its first aircraft carrier. It will be learning how to operate carrier battle groups. It landed an aircraft on a deck of an aircraft carrier, something they didn't know how to do even last year. Russia is building a new generation of ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and is commissioning a new generation of boomers, of these huge nuclear-powered submarines that are capable of launching submarine-launched ballistic missiles from any part of the global ocean. So they are modernizing, the Russians are modernizing under Putin to the tune of $800 billion when we are cutting almost $1 trillion from our military budget over 10 years. So both absolute and relative power of the U.S. military is declining. Having said that, on espionage, I would add something here. Yes, relatively speaking, Russia is more closed society, so is Iran and China. But in comparison to the Cold War, these societies are incomparably more open. There are many, many more people traveling abroad. The Chinese leadership all has their kids studying in this country. Russian oligarchs have accounts and property. And by the way, Russian members of parliament have property in Miami and in Europe. So there are more openings for recruiting Russians in high positions to find out what's really going on. And the problem is we're losing our human intelligence skills. People who were around during the Cold War are retiring, or even some of them are dead, not in shape to work, clearly. And the young generation believes in drones. They believe in eavesdropping. And I'm not knocking it down. Our technical capabilities are tremendous. But to know the intentions of leadership, to know the secrets of inner sanctum of foreign leadership, be it in Iran, be it in China or in Russia, you need to have human assets. And unfortunately, our guys, they're getting better in terms of running paramilitary operations in Afghanistan and elsewhere, going after the bad guys, taking them out. The operation to capture and bring to justice the son-in-law of Osama bin Laden. It's a good operation. I'm not knocking it. You and I may disagree where is the best place to put him on trial. Maybe Guantanamo would have been better. I don't know. But in terms of having deep penetration spies, we're still not a match to the Russians.
I would agree with that. I thought there was something interesting that was brought up in the event that you hosted, and that was actually the idea that as Russia's becoming more aggressive with dissidents, whether they're jailing people, there's actually been kidnappings and some murders, an increase in laws that put people, for doing things that would be meaningless to us, in threat of long-term imprisonments, the rise of anti-Americanism.
Mm-hmm.
But as you see this pushback from not just the government in Russia, but the government in China, I think the rise of the people who are looking for increased civil society and more of what we have here are actually fighting back even harder, even as they're facing a tougher government. And I think that's a change from the Cold War period.
Well, during the Cold War, Russia was a much closer society. I was born there, lived there till I was 16 when my family and me left for Israel. It was a more brutal society. The same KGB that we mentioned was all-powerful. It is a little bit more open today. And even then in the 70s, there were people who protested. There were people who staged public demonstrations. There were Jewish refuseniks who wanted to go to Israel, like my family, and we complained, and we created our own networks. But it is really sad that 20 years after the collapse of communism, there is such a strong wave of anti-Americanism. They blame us for their problems. They're not taking responsibility for their alcoholism, for their low work ethic, for the economy that does not encourage innovation. Look, Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, one of the most successful companies in the world, one of the most successful business people in the world, was born in Russia, and he doesn't like the Putin regime. And there are many others like Sergey. So you have a classic petrostate, an economy that is based on oil and gas, and it is the Kremlin and Mr. Putin who control oil and gas. There are very few petrostates in the world, maybe Norway is the only one, that are true democracies. That kind of economy encourages central control, like in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, you name it. These are not democratic economies. And unfortunately in Russia, as long as the money is coming from the other end of the pipeline, be it oil or gas, they will continue harsh controls because it's a very small people on the top who benefits to billions of dollars of personal wealth from that bonanza of petroleum-based energy.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up one more thing before we let you go, and of course we appreciate your time. But when we look at the policy towards Central Asia, as right now, we're looking to pull out of Afghanistan, somewhere around the end of 2014, if that still holds up. But as we're pulling up, and we've seen Chinese companies operating up, in the northern parts of Afghanistan, and are we going to lose every gain that we've made in Afghanistan as the Russians and the Chinese will be coming back in? And also, how does that relate to other countries in the region that were actually mentioned, such as Ukraine and Azerbaijan and all the other states, Kazakhstan and whatnot?
An excellent question. With this administration, I'm pessimistic because they are looking at Central Asia. Central Asia are the 5 countries in the heart of Eurasia. They are to the south of Central Russia, south of Siberia, and north of Afghanistan. They are Muslim, but they are also secular. They do not like the fanatics from the Salafi and Wahhabi movement, and they want our help in fighting terrorism. Unfortunately, this administration was looking at Central Asia only through the prism of fighting the war in Afghanistan. And if in 2014 we're out, we're also out of Central Asia, and that, in my opinion, is going to be a big mistake. Not only China and Russia are going to be locked in a de facto competition there, there's a transnational Islam. There's the Muslim Brotherhood that is already ruling Egypt, that's about to take over Syria and threatening Jordan, the only Arab country besides Egypt that has a peace treaty with Israel. Besides Muslim Brotherhood, which is not that prominent there are other organizations. There's the Party of Liberation, which is an Islamist organization called Hizb ut-Tahrir al-Islami, the Islamist Party, Islamic Party of Liberation. It has a clandestine branch, it has an above-board propaganda branch, and there are jihadi, violent, militant organizations like the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan and the Islamic Movement of Turkestan. And these are threatening the survival of these regimes.
Great answer. And I just wanted to say that as we're pulling out of Central Asia, it's also going to impact the intelligence we have in that region as well. Well, Ariel Cohen, I want to thank you so much for taking your time today and joining us. We're actually going to be down in Washington next week. We're doing 2 days of shows, Tuesday and Wednesday, at the Heritage Foundation. And, of course, we'll be doing our shows at CPAC as well. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see you. And, of course, you're always welcome to join us in the studio at your home.
I'll be delighted.
Great. Again, Ariel Cohen, and you can go to heritage.org to find out more about Ariel and some of the things that he's working on, and also the Heritage Foundation. We will also post the event again. We've already posted numerous times, but it was definitely worth a watch. And, of course, on April 4th, the other event that he had mentioned, you'll want to check that out as well. So, as always, thank you, Ariel, for joining us on the Final Say radio show.
Thank you so much.